Welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon. The Force is strong with this one.
Hello there and welcome to Star Wars Comics in Canon, your guide to the wider Star Wars canon through the comic book lens. And to take you on this journey, I'm your host, Mike Burton. And so brings episode 88. So guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't tuned in before, in brief, I'm going to go through the vague plot details of each of the comics I am tackling this week, and I'm also going to talk about the many connections to other Star Wars content and some other interesting tidbits along the way, and also species and planets that pop up that are interesting that I maybe haven't tackled in a few recent episodes. But before we get into all of that, let me give you some of the information about the comics we are actually tackling this week. So it is the second volume of the High Republic comics by Marvel. So this is issues 6 to 10, and they're written by Cavan Scott. So issue number 6 was released June 30th, 2021. Issue 10 was released October 20th, 2021. And the trade paperback collection was released December 7th, 2021. Now, if you're wondering where this sits in the timeline, the High Republic era is around 200 years before The Phantom Menace. That's primarily the first phase of the High Republic, which is what this sits in. This sits within the first phase and the second wave, so the corresponding books and content along with this is primarily linked to The Rising Storm, which is a book review that I tackled back in November of 2021. If you are listening on YouTube, you can just check out the book reviews or the High Republic playlist, because it will be in there. And the connecting novels is Race to Crash Point Tower that I tackled in February 2022, and Out of the Shadows, which I plan to tackle March 2022. They are the book reviews that I do that are spoiler free, and then towards the end I give a bit more plot information for anyone who hasn't picked up those books. But for this episode in particular, I do highly recommend people have either listened to my book review of The Rising Storm or have picked up the book or listened to the audiobook, because A, it's fantastic, and B, the plot heavily revolves around what happens here, especially sort of the latter elements of this volume. So issues 6, 7 and 8 are part of the Heart of the Drengir story arc that takes place just before or concurrent to The Rising Storm, and then the last two issues of this, which form up Shadow of the Nihil story arc, so issues 9 and 10, they are set after The Rising Storm, and there's a specific thing that happens at the end of issue 8 which clearly shows this, and I want to clarify that this episode is obviously going to be spoilers about the comics themselves, but also does somewhat spoil The Rising Storm. But as I said in my book review of Rising Storm, if you read the blurb or the first page or really know anything about The Rising Storm, the thing that gets spoiled in these comics is pretty obviously going to happen, considering The Rising Storm is all set around the Republic Fair, and it's quite rare in Star Wars for you to get an entire 400-page book about just something that everything all goes to plan. So that's the little hint there. But before I delve into the plot itself, the people involved in this, so I already said that Cavan Scott is the writer. Now there's a wide variety of people involved in these numerous issues, and I will just quickly add, if you haven't already checked out my episode on Volume 1 of the High Republic, make sure you go check that out if you haven't already read the comics and stuff, because obviously it's a lot of fun, and it's another episode from me. That was episode 84 of Star Wars Comics in Canon, and if you also want to check out the High Republic Adventures comics, I tackled those in episode 86 of Star Wars Comics in Canon. Those specifically are done by IDW Publishing, and I know a lot of you listen and read along via Marvel Unlimited, so if you are doing that, I do really recommend checking out some of my IDW Publishing episodes, because you can't obviously read those on Marvel Unlimited because they're not published by those guys. So High Republic Adventures Volume 1 was episode 86, and I will be tackling the second volume of High Republic Adventures in a couple of episodes time, but I'll get into all that sort of stuff at the end of when I've gone through all the plots and things here, because then I'll tell you what I've got coming up. But the people involved in this, I'm just going to go from person to person rather than issue to issue to save me rambling on here for absolutely ages. So obviously the writer, Cavan Scott. Then the penciler for issues 6, 7 and 10 was Georges Gianti, and the penciler for issues 8 and 9 was Ario Anandito. Now, there are several more people who are the inkers of these issues. So, we've got Carl Story, who did ink work for issues 6, 7 and 10. We've got Victor Olazaba, who did issues 9 and 10. Then we've also got Mark Morales, who did issues 8 and 9. So, obviously, there's quite a few issues where there's more than one inker, just to clarify. And then we've got Sean Parsons and Mark Deering, who also helped on issue number 9. So for clarity, issue 9 had Mark Morales, Victor Olazaba, Sean Parsons, and also Mark Deering on there, and then Victor Olazaba and Carl Story did issue 10 together. But it seems that issues 6, 7, and 8 were done by one person, 6 and 7 by Carl Story, 8 by Mark Morales. And then finally we have the colour artists. So we've got Annalisa Leone, who did issues 6, 7, and 8. We've got Rachel Rosenberg, who did issue 9, and then we've got Carlos Lopez, who did issue number 10. So that is all the personnel, and so we move on to issue number 6. And just before we get into the crawl, I will clarify that this volume takes place a few months after the previous volume / phase 1, wave 1, which was more centered around the Light of the Jedi book. So generally speaking, Light of the Jedi kind of kicks off the High Republic to start with. Then you've got A Test of Courage and Into the Dark, as well as Volume 1 of High Republic Comics and the High Republic Adventures. And then with Wave 2, you've got The Rising Storm that kicks it off, and then Race to Crash Point Tower, Out of the Shadows, this volume, and the second volume of the High Republic Adventures. There is a bit more other content around it, like miniseries and stuff, but I'm not going to get into that because it's not strictly speaking relevant. But if you tune into every episode of Star Wars Comics and Canon, you will get a good idea of these things. So without further ado, let's go into the first issue of this batch, which is issue number 6, and here is The Crawl. The Drengir assault on Starlight Beacon and Sedri Minor was stopped thanks to an uneasy alliance between the Jedi and the Hutts. Jedi Keeve Trennis' desperate gambit to help stop the attack paid off, but they may have cost the life of her former master, Skeer. Now, a much greater conflict is about to test Keeve and the Jedi like never before. So with the general idea of what's going on and the timeline set, let's get into things. So with issue 6, you've got Avar Kriss and the twins Terek and Seret, along with Myarga The Hutt fighting the Drengir on a planet called Davak, which seems to be in the High Republic only. They also have some Rancors with them fighting alongside, and then meanwhile you've got Maru, who's on Starlight Beacon. He speaks with Stellan Gios, who confirms that he's a bit concerned about Avar's alliance with the Hutts, as is the Council. Meanwhile, it shows that Keeve Trennis is with Skeer. Skeer is in a stasis feed, holding off the Drengir infection, because from Light of the Jedi, he had his arm cut off in a flight accident when they were dealing with things from the Great Disaster and the aftermath of that, and then he kind of bonded with the Drengir in some way to kind of get a connection to their root mind and understand them better, but now he's kind of being controlled by them somewhat. And while Keeve is there, it's also confirmed that Skeer's force connection is waning, and there's a doctor there called Ginole, who's there speaking to Keeve and is the one keeping an eye on Skeer and keeping him in the stasis field. Now, Dr. Ginole, he is actually an anacondan, so you can kind of guess what he's going to look like just by the name of the species. But he's actually fitted with some cybernetic parts and things, because anacondans are basically just giant snakes. They don't have arms or limbs or appendages, so this doctor has got some cybernetics, so he's got basically little robotic arms that help him do doctory things. Now, you actually first saw an anacondan in the Clone Wars episode called Deception. So the character was called Morley, they're on Lotho Minor, and they dealt with Maul and Sauvage Press. So obviously Maul doesn't die in The Phantom Menace, he survived, and then in the Clone Wars he comes back basically, and people who've seen Solo would know this anyway, so it's not spoilers, but the main story arc that brings Maul back into the fray, that's where this Morley anacondan actually is. And anacondans can grow up to 4.17 meters in length, and they are in Legends like a very small amount, but they're kind of in Legends basically from the period between the Anacondan appearing in the Clone Wars and then the canon reset a few years later. So it's not a very long period of time for the Anacondans to exist. I believe they were first actually in a Legends book, but it was about Darth Maul and stuff, which I think heavily connected with the Clone Wars, either just before it came out or around that time. So it's basically because of the Clone Wars and Darth Maul we know what an Anacondan is, and there's only 3 of them in canon at the moment. Anyway, back to the story. So you've got the Drengir fighting Avar and co, and they seem to actually be winning. Avar manages to find some locals that they were trying to protect, and they seem to have all been drained of their life force. The Rancor that Avar was riding is knocked down by a Drengir, the Drengir start to infect it, and then Myarga comes in and shoots it in the head to stop it becoming infected and becoming a Drengir Rancor thing. So Avar then says they're being overwhelmed and calls out to Maru on Starlight Beacon. Maru confirms to Keeve what he's doing and says he's going to assist. Keeve decides that she needs Skeer to help, so she turns off the status field and goes in. His Drengir arm then grabs her, and the roots grow and go into her nose and mouth, and she falls into this strange root world. So in this peculiar root world, Keeve is then reunited with Skeer. They both seem to be there in like a physical form, even though they both kind of know they're not there physically. It's like this strange thing. Keeve says, is this part of the Force? Is that how the Drengir are communicating? And Skeer says he isn't sure. But they're basically, the root world is the root mind, and it's just how the Drengir are communicating. There's roots and vines everywhere. Things are a little bit miscoloured. When Keeve goes into this root world and things and is reunited with Skeer, they give each other a hug, and then Skeer comments it's not the Jedi way, and they kind of laugh that part off. So they then go off and try and find the heart of the system. While this is going on, you've got Avar still fighting this battle with the Drengir and is still not winning very well, but she can now hear Keeve's song within the song of the Drengir. Now, to reiterate, one of Avar's strengths and one of her Force powers is she hears the Force as a song, and therefore she can hear everyone's Force kind of imprint as a song, which comes up quite a lot in the High Republic stuff. I really, really like that element and that idea, and I think it works very well both for characters and lore, but also as a storytelling device is very helpful. But upon discovering this, Avar then communicates with Maru on Starlight once again. He hasn't yet left, and he checks on Keeve, and it shows that she's standing next to Skeer with all those roots going in. She says out loud that they are searching for the first seed, but they are not strong enough. So she does have some degree of understanding of things going on outside of the root world, as well as while being inside the root world. So Maru and a person called Oberlin assist. They use the Force to try and help Skeer and Keeve overcome the Drengir, and then the roots within this root world let go of Keeve and Skeer and start to slink away. So Skeer and Keeve grab onto these as they're retreating, and then they get pulled to the Great Progenitor. Now, I want to clarify here, Oberlin, I believe I mentioned them in the last volume of the High Republic, but they feature in the Rising Storm a fair amount of things. This, in layman's terms, this blob alien that lives in a suit. They're only in this like 1 or 2 panels, so I'm not going to delve into them anymore. So if you want to find out more information, read the Rising Storm and listen to other episodes of Star Wars Comics in Canon. So back in this root world thing, Keeve can see into the mind of this great progenitor, which seems to be the first seed of the Drengir, the thing that is controlling them, the kind of dominant Drengir of it all. This great progenitor, while Keeve is in there, stabs her through the centre of her being, and a spike of the Drengir root comes out the other side. Skeer sees this and he rips his Drengir arm off, and that cuts the connection completely, both in the root mind and outside of the root mind. Back to Keeve seems to be unharmed physically by that attack, and she also says that she recalls something called Mulita. Now, Maru looks this up and things, can't find it on any normal records, but he does find the planet in some ancient system that he has access to. So they seem to know where this great progenitor is hiding, and that is where issue number 6 ends. So let's move on to issue number 7, which has one of the most interesting connections, I think, this episode. So I'll get into that shortly. But episode 7 starts off with Keeve being in this strange world. There's a lot of people who are talking to her, some who are dead, some are alive. A lot of them come from the first volume of the High Republic comics. So you've got like one of the Rhodians, you've got the little boy that she kind of followed with and things. And so she knows something is kind of amiss. And there's someone that she describes as a ghost lady who is there and is semi-guiding her. This individual is white skinned, is wearing a white cloak and things, and when I say white, I don't mean like Caucasian white, I mean like actually fully pale, the colour white. Before Keeve can really figure out what's going on, she is attacked by someone called Darth Krall. So Darth Krall, and that's Krall Krall, they are part of the Lost 20. Now, the Lost 20 are 20 Jedi that left the Order on good terms. There were 20 Jedi Masters that left the Order on good terms. And although it's not officially confirmed that Keeve Trennis is one of those, in the audio drama Dooku Jedi Lost, which is by Cavan Scott, that came out when Project Luminous had already been announced, but before Project Luminous was confirmed to be the High Republic and stuff. And there's quite a lot of connections in sort of 2018, 2019 content created by some of the individuals involved in the High Republic initiative and their associated friends that lean onto certain things of the High Republic. I know that Alyssa Wong, for example, in Dr. Afra comics, they talk about the High Republic occasionally as well. But the Lost 20, the reason I'm referring to it is because in the audio drama Dooku Jedi Lost, which I went into in episode 26 Star Wars Comics in Canon, because that's when I did the big Dooku biography, where I basically went through the one-shot with him, which was the Age of Republic, as well as the audio drama and a few other bits and pieces that of like Dooku's lore and how he got to where he is, being in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. So if you want to find out more about Dooku, go check that out. But basically, there is a Master Trennis who is known to be part of the Lost 20. Dooku was actually number 20 of the Lost 20. Obviously, they were called that after Dooku entered, but they're like statues of the other members of the Lost Jedi Order that left and things. But Darth Krall is mentioned in Dooku Jedi Lost, originally called Radaki. And Radaki's saber, or Darth Krall's saber, is actually in the Bogan collection. And the Bogan collection is on Coruscant in the Jedi Temple. It's this hidden safe, basically, full of peculiar and strange artifacts, primarily dark side objects and things that they don't want the rest of the Jedi being able to see or get access to. And in Dooku Jedi Lost, Sifo Dyas, as well as Dooku, go into the Bogan collection and look around at some cool stuff. There's lots of very interesting tidbits and bits of information in there that are intriguing, but Darth Krall was one of them that I found the most intriguing because I really like the Sith and they very much interest me, but obviously they're barely in the canon apart from, the few around the Skywalker saga. And Radaki / Darth Krall actually split from the Jedi Order initially because he believed that the Jedi should retain their wealth and their family, even becoming a Jedi. It's also confirmed that he tamed something called the Nightmare Conjunction, and oddly enough, the Nightmare Conjunction is mentioned in a holojournal by Padawan Clias Terradine. Now, Clias Terradine is actually a character who is in the Monster of Temple Peak 4-part miniseries that I tackled in the last episode 87, which was Ty Yorik's origin story. So Ty Yorik is the Thalothian, she's on the cover of The Rising Storm, she's like a saber for hire. If you want to hear more about her origin story and stuff, and why she kind of left the Order, you get that information in there, and you find out about Clias Terradine in that story as well. So it's just very interesting that the Nightmare Conjunction obviously being connected to those two things. Obviously it's not a coincidence because Cavan Scott wrote all these High Republic comics, as well as the Monster of Temple Peak and also The Rising Storm. So he did this, but what further connects the Nightmare Conjunction to these things is that the records of the planet Mulita, as mentioned at the end of issue 6, that's actually found in information from that era. So the same sort of time era, all those things kind of happened. And we don't know what the Nightmare Conjunction actually is. I have a suspicion, my guess might be the Nightmare Conjunction was when the Sith originally raised up the Drengir or something like that. But that is just a guess of mine. I looked online, I couldn't really find anything specific. I think it's being saved either for the next phase of the High Republic. There's going to be 150 years prior to this phase. So that will mean it's 350 odd years before the Phantom Menace. We'll see how that kind of goes, or potentially it's going to be in the Acolyte series it'll get mentioned, or potentially it'll be when the canon eventually goes into the older Republic, when the Sith were about and the Sith Wars, all that sort of stuff, about 1,000 years before the Skywalker Saga. When that all happens, I imagine we'll get some information on the Nightmare Conjunction, but at the moment we just don't know what it is. But yeah, it's just interesting that Keeve gets a vision and basically has this kind of Force vision fight with Darth Krall in this strange world that she's still kind of connected to the Drengir root mind in. So in this story, as I said, when she's in this vision, she gets stabbed by Darth Krall, and then she also sees some statues / totems that were holding in the Drengir, which you get to find out more information about that in Into the Dark, which is the young adult novel from Phase 1, Wave 1 of the High Republic, and that's basically when we first find out the most amount of information on the Drengir. After seeing all the stuff and Darth Krall and all that sort of etc., Keeve then wakes up, and it's confirmed that she was actually meditating on Starlight Beacon. Dr. Ginole actually communicates with her and says that obviously he was monitoring her vitals after that connection with her and Skeer and the Drengir and stuff from the previous issue, and he says that her vitals jumped up while she was meditating. She says it's fine, don't worry about it, and he's like, I thought meditation was meant to reduce your vitals and things, and she basically just gives an offhand comment and then heads to Maru for basically something to do. Avar is currently speaking with Maru, and she's confirming that she wants more Jedi. Some of them are at the Republic Fair, and to clarify, this is still set before the Rising Storm, but some of these Jedi are at the Republic Fair and things, but none can really be spared for Avar. Keeve wants to help, and Maru is a little bit suspicious. He's like, are we sure we can trust you? Do we really know how far this Drengir infection went with you? What do we know? And then before he could fully dismiss her, he receives communication and receives this data pad from someone else saying there's a new issue that needs to be addressed. And he was like, well, Keeve, here's your time to prove it. Here's the information. So, meanwhile, we see the Nihil are attacking some Shartos. Now, Shartos are like mini Wookiees, that's how I describe them. This is the first time, I think, in the canon, and they were first in Legends in a role-playing sourcebook, but across canon and Legends, they've barely been in it at all. But just imagine like a mini Wookiee. Not quite a Ewok, they very much just a tiny Wookiee. A pygmy Wookiee, as it were. So yeah, the Nihil are attacking these Shartos, and they're after some sprayer droids. Keeve Trennis then appears, defends these Shartos that are being attacked, but is then distracted by a force vision of Krall. The main Nihil that is leading this group smashes Keeve in the side of the head, and then before she can kind of react or do anything further, this main Nihil is hit by this very large metal object that just smashes into him. It shows this metal object was actually thrown by Orla Jareni. Now, Orla Jareni, she is someone who's been in The Rising Storm, and I believe she was in Light of the Jedi as well. She is an Umbaran, so she has very white skin, so she is the, in air quotes, ghost lady that Keeve saw in her vision. She has a purified double lightsaber, so she has two lightsabers that connect together basically, and they are purified because they have a white crystal. And this is because she managed to purify it, much like Ahsoka did in the Ahsoka book with the Inquisitor's lightsaber. You know, in layman's terms, if you guys haven't listened to Star Wars comics and canon before, and if you haven't read the 2017 Darth Vader comics, and you haven't read the Rise of Kylo Ren miniseries, then you would not know this, but in short, Sith, when they want to use a lightsaber to make it red, they bleed it. They hold it, put loads of dark energy into it, and it bleeds the crystal, turns it red, and there you go. Then what a Jedi can do is come into that afterwards, and what a Jedi or a light side Force user can do is with this bled crystal that is red, you can then put good energy and good vibes into it basically and turn it pure again, but it turns it white instead of the standard, green or blue, which is generally the most common ones. So Ahsoka did that, hence why she has the white lightsabers when you see her in anything after the Clone Wars, and Orla found this old Sith weapon and then she purified it, hence why she has managed to get purified crystals. And I want to add in here that in Legends, it was not bleeding lightsaber crystals, it was that the Sith couldn't get lightsaber crystals from the same place the Jedi could, so they used to create their own lightsaber crystals, and creating a synthetic lightsaber crystal would mean they would always come out red, hence why the Sith had red lightsabers, in Legends at least. But anyway, Orla Jareni, as well as having the purified double lightsaber, she is a way seeker. So she basically goes out, she isn't attached to a specific Jedi temple, and she can kind of go out and just do what the Force wills her to do in essence. And I believe that she was actually more so introduced in the Into the Dark book, which is obviously what I mentioned before. So these comics have heavy connections to the Drengir. So as well as reading The Rising Storm, I would recommend people check out the Into the Dark book, or at least my book review of Into the Dark, because a lot of these characters are reappearing. But yeah, that's Orla Jareni, and obviously, as I said, she's the ghost lady from Keeve's vision, but she helps out Keeve. They manage to take down all of the Nihil, put them in binders, and then the Republic is on its way to pick them up. Orla clears the gas from the air because whenever the Nihil attack, they always leave out like gas canisters and stuff to poison people basically. And she confirms that she went out to find Keeve as she feels like Keeve may have lost herself. Keeve is unsure about this, but then confirms that she actually doubts herself. She worries about Skeer and him falling to the dark side and all these things. And then she hears the Root Mind speak. In her mind, the Root Mind says that the Jedi have lost. And the last panel of issue number 7 shows Avar Kriss's skeleton stripped of all flesh with Drengir roots going in and out of its skull, which is quite a lot to deal with. But that is where issue number 7 ends, so we move on to issue number 8, the finale of the story arc of Heart of the Drengir. So this issue starts with Maru, who managed to get a few reinforcements to Melita, where Avar is fighting the Drengir and whatnot. There aren't that many Jedi, but there's still a fair few more Jedi, so now you've still got the Jedi as well as the Hutt, and you've got Orbil in there as well as Avar Kriss and the twins, but you've also got Master Comac and Reath Silas there as well, who are once again characters who are central around Into the Dark. They're also in Out of the Shadows as well, which takes place after these, and I'll be tackling that book review in the coming month or so. And Comac is basically an artifact specialist. He likes going to old temples and things, and Reath is very much a bookworm, and not in a derogatory way. He really likes reading lots of hollows and finding out about history and stuff, and yeah, interesting characters, but I'll delve more into them. Well, I already did in Into the Dark, and I will again in Out of the Shadows. The Drengir then start controlling these giant ants, which seem to be local to the system, and they start to fight as well. Then Orla Jareni and Keeve Trennis appear on Orla's ship. Orla greets Skeer, and it's confirmed that they have some sort of flirty history together. There's even a joke where one of them says, "My pleasure," and the other one says, "Wouldn't be the first time," and Keeve is like, "I wish I didn't hear that." So, once again, the High Republic, little bit hints of some sort of more flirtatious, maybe more of a physical relationship. I know that in The Rising Storm that is touched upon, but won't go into that any further here. But this group, they all now are still fighting the Drengir. Keeve and Terek go off to find Avar, and it's shown that she is caught by the Great Progenitor. The Great Progenitor is now controlling Avar, and Avar's arm lifts up and then Force pushes Keeve out of the way, and once Avar has been fully consumed by the Drengir, they'll be even more powerful, likely because Avar's got the great way of connecting all of the Jedi's minds, so the root mind will probably get strengthened by that ability. Keeve is then grabbed by Avar Kriss and lifted into the air, and then she confirms that the Great Progenitor criffed up. And crift is a nice little swear word in Star Wars. There's multiple Star Wars swear words, which I quite like. There's Carabast, which is a favourite of mine that Zeb does a lot in Rebels. You've got Dang Farrik, and that's quite popular in The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. And Criff is another one. You know, I keep this podcast clean just so anyone can listen to it. So you can guess. If someone said you criffed up, you know what they mean. And the Drengirs confuse how they criffed up, and then Avar connects all of the Jedi's minds together. There are about 11 Jedi there, and they all are chanting the same Force mantra, and this means that the Great Progenitor is then cut off from the hive/root mind, because where Avar's connected to it, she managed to kind of isolate it. Myarga The Hutt is there and is trying to kill the Great Progenitor, but the rest of the Jedi stop her, saying that they protect life, which in my opinion is quite lame, because I would 100% kill the Drengir, without a doubt, even if they are life. They're not like normal sentient life where they can make decisions, it seems. They literally seem to just kill or run away. But putting that aside, the Jedi managed to put together a stasis field generator, which then further disrupts the Drengir's connections to the rest of the Drengir. Reith and Comac activate the feed, and then the shield locks the Great Progenitor in, and Myarga is persistent, saying she still wants it to be dead, and Orla says, nope, let's just lock up the Great Progenitor in the Bogan collection on Starlight Beacon, and the Jedi continue to stand firm against the Myarga, and Myarga eventually just gives up and leaves on her ship along with her cronies and the remaining people who are left on her side after the Drengir battles. And the final panels of this comic show that the group of Jedi seem to be rejoicing. They've defeated the Drengir. They communicate to Maru, and Maru confirms that the Republic Fair is gone. And they're like, what do you mean? And it's like, the Nihil attacked. It's gone. And you get to see one image of the Republic Fair just in ruins. And that is the Rising Storm spoiler, because that's not how it necessarily ends, but that occurs within the Rising Storm. So that gives a good idea of where we are storyline-wise now. So that was issue number 8 that ends, and so we move on to the penultimate issue, which is issue number 9. Now, issue number 9 is the first of the 2-part arc Shadow of the Nihil, and it takes place several months after issue number 8 ended, which means that it is several months after the events of the Rising Storm. So issue 9 starts with Orla Jareni flying her Vector. A Nihil ship attacks her, and it's confirmed that it's actually Keeve Trennis and Terek, who are in full Nihil gear. They've got like the Nihil makeup on them and things, and you've still got Keeve's internal monologue saying like, I can't believe this happened, I can't believe that we got to this point, sort of things. Quite dark and depressing, and then it shows what happened before. So from what I can gather, this seems before, like maybe a couple weeks before, if not slightly less than that. So it's on Starlight Beacon, and you've got Avar Kriss and the others are there witnessing Avar speak to Stellan Gios via Holo. They're discussing about the Nihil and what to do next with the Drengir threat defeated. They think Lorna D is the Eye of the Nihil, but think that she died. Now, it gets all into that in the Tempest Runner audio drama, which I tackled partly in the Rising Storm book review that I did, but if you listen to things on Audible or anything like that, you can find the Tempest Runner on there. Because they think Lorna is dead, they believe that someone else must be taking up the mantle of the Eye. There is a person who is a Talpini who might be it, but then there's also a very blurry picture of someone with a helmet that might also be it, but they have no idea who the person in the helmet is, but they know that the Talpini is someone called Zetar. Avar wants to go after these Nihil, and then it cuts back to present day. So a bit of information about what a Talpini is and the Nihil people we just heard about. So a Talpini is basically a very short creature that is generally quite furry, but their faces are furless, so they're kind of like a small primate with a very, very big mouth. Now, they were first shown in Rogue One, a Star Wars story, and the character that you see in that is called Weetif Cub, and he's played by Warwick Davis. And Warwick Davis does like 2 or 3 cameos in Rogue One, actually. And fun fact is the one that when you see Warwick Davis not in any makeup or anything at the end of Solo, a Star Wars story, he is actually the same character he played in The Phantom Menace at the Bunta Eve pod racing. You see him right near Jabba and stuff, so that's just a fun little connection there. Anything Warwick Davis is fun. Obviously he played Wicket in Return of the Jedi, that's where he kind of rose to fame, and he's been in almost every Star Wars movie since. But anyway, Talpini are from the planet Talpi, and yet they're all these fairly short creatures, but they're all sentient and intelligent and etc. And the Talpini they're referring to for the Nihil is actually in a power suit. They are called Zeetar, Zeetar. Zeetar was introduced in The Rising Storm. They're also in the Tempest Runner audio drama, and they appear more in these comics. And then the very blurry person who had a helmet on, that is Marchion Ro. They are the true Eye of the Storm, but they always operate a lot of things behind the scenes. There is a 2-part comic series called Eye of the Storm. I've got issue 1 and issue 2 is due to be delivered shortly. And when I tackle volume 3 of the High Republic, that's going to be issues 11 to 15 of the High Republic, but the trade paperback collection also includes the Eye of the Storm 2-parter. So I haven't fully decided if I'm going to do the Eye of the Storm in its own little episode, or if I'm going to attach it to the High Republic comics I do for volume 3. I'll figure out when I read them all and see how much work it is, because 7 comics in one episode is quite a lot, and especially if it's going to be, from what I've read from Eye of the Storm 1, it is basically exposition and lore dump, and I don't know if that would serve better in its own episode or not. If anyone has any preferences, please let me know, otherwise I'll just figure it out when we get there, but that won't be for another 4 or 5 weeks before I have to think about that anyway. So, Avar has an idea regarding how to handle the Nihil. She wants to go and check a specific area, but Stellan Gios and the Jedi Council as a whole are suspicious of it. They said they've checked this place numerous times before, there's no reason for them to have to check there again, because they found nothing. Avar keeps drumming at home and saying that the Nihil are amassing in the Sula system. We've got numerous reports of communications between them speaking about this. We need to go there and attack. We need to make sure we kind of stomp them out in a sense. Stellan then completely refuses to action any further, and he mentions about the only way the Jedi should help is in the unified response, which is what they all do. Keeve then gets agitated by this, and she cuts in. She confirms that the Nihil planted the Drengir seeds to distract them all, and which is why what happened at the Republic Fair happened, and that she wants them to act as well. Stellan then refuses even further, confirms about the unified response, and then closes the comm on Keeve. Avar confirms that she appreciates Keeve trying to help, but it didn't actually do anything to assist, and it's kind of just aggravated Stellan and the Council now. So Keeve, frustrated, walks away. Back to present day, you've got Orla sending a distress signal and the Ataraxia appears. As the Ataraxia appears, Keeve Trennis then sends out a distress signal to the Nihil. Numerous vectors then come out of the Ataraxia and start to attack Keeve's ship. Skeer is involved in this as well, he is piloting one of the vectors, and the Nihil received Keeve's distress signal, and then they all appear as well. Several vectors are fighting with Keeve and Terek's Nihil ship. Keeve manages to destroy one of the vectors, and is then clamped by another Nihil ship that has just appeared. Keeve's ship gets taken away via hyperspace or the paths. The paths is how the Nihil travel for hyperspace. I'm not going to go into that detail here because I've mentioned it numerous times before. But if you want to know that, check out one of my book reviews because I do go into it there. And I think like the Jedi and the Rising Storm, I talk about it. But it confirms that this is all going according to plan. And it shows that the vector that Keeve actually shot and destroyed was being remote controlled. It then does a quick flashback showing that Avar has an idea and Skeer relays that to Keeve, and then it cuts back to air quotes modern day. So the Nihil ship then lands on a planet, and then Keeve and Terek get asked whose Tempest it is. A person who is a Crowloot asks who they're with, and the Crowloot is a species that you will see from Star Wars The Force Awakens. So there's a character called Unkar Plutt. He's the person who Rey gives scraps to, and he's like, 1/4 portion. That guy, that's Unkar Plutt. He's also voiced by Simon Pegg, fun fact, and he is a Crowloot. Now Crowloots are always male, and a female Crowloot is actually a slightly different species called a Gilead. Now there is a Gilead in the Star Wars Resistance show who goes by the name of Aunt Z. Their name is too hard to pronounce and it's such a minor part of this, I'm not going to go into it, but if you watch Star Wars Resistance and you see Aunt Z, that is a Gilead, which is basically a female version of a Crowloot, and also Crowloots are semi-aquatic and their skin actually sags when they are outside of salt water. So it's a bit of fun stuff about them, but there is a Nihil who is a Crowloot who is slightly senior asking Keeve and Terek what they're doing and who they're with. They confirm that they are with Pan Eyta, Eyta, I always have trouble pronouncing his last name, and he was a Dowatin. He is in the Rising Storm, he's also in the Tempest Runner, and he's thought to be dead, but from what happens in the Rising Storm and the Tempest Runner, it's kind of still a little bit, we're not sure. So this Crowloot gets Keeve with an electro whip. She manages to grab it as it hits her and then flips this guy over. Zeetar, that Talpini, then appears. And He believes that she may have been with Pan Aeta's Storm, which is the name of like a group of Nihil under leadership of a Tempest Runner. And so this issue ends with Zetar wanting Keeve to kill a hostage they have. And this hostage is Myarga the Hutt. And he hands her this big warhammer. So that's the end of issue number 9. So we go on to the final issue of this volume and collection, issue number 10. So Keeve is trying to figure out what to do in this situation where she's meant to kill a Hutt in cold blood with this giant hammer. She notes that there is a Nihil in the background who is carrying some nagnol, which is some very explosive kind of gas, but it can also kill a Hutt. And then actually in volume 1 of the High Republic comics, when the group of them found a dead Hutt on a Nihil ship that was killed by some sort of strange gas and lots of stabbings, and then it kind of had a Drengir inside of it and whatnot, that was actually killed by a nagnol. Now, nagnol was actually in Legends, but it was only very briefly in like 2 bits of Legends content, and one of them was Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords. There's like a few lines of dialogue that mention it, but to my knowledge you don't actually get to see it. But that's Nagnol, Nagnol. So as Keeve kind of clocks this Nihil doing that, she seemingly uses the Force to kind of nudge him a little bit, so he drops it. He drops it and then it explodes, causing a large amount of havoc. The Tempest Runner Zetar then shoots the Nihil that dropped that, calling him an idiot, and then Keeve says to Zetar that Myarga worked with the Jedi, so we should keep her alive and interrogate her for their secrets. Meanwhile, on the Ataraxia, you've got Avar Kriss and Skeer who are kind of keeping an eye on things and speaking to Seret, because obviously Seret and Terek, the twins, are Force bonded, so they can kind of read each other's thoughts at the same time. So they've got one who's obviously in the midst of the Nihil with Keeve, and the other one who's with the Jedi kind of keeping tabs on things. And it shows that Skeer is struggling to use the Force to lift up a lightsaber. He manages to lift it, a little bit up and then drops it and kind of sighs. And then he gets comm from the Doctor, who is an Anacondan. And the Anacondan confirms that they know why Skeer is losing his Force connection. So back to Keeve and stuff, the Hutt is now in this big tank. It looks a little bit like a Bacta tank, but instead of it pumping full of Bacta to heal the Hutt, it can get pumped with unrefined nagnol, which as I said is fatal to Hutts. So Zetar says that Keeve has to interrogate the Hutt quickly because the nagnol is going to kill them. The nagnol starts to get pumped in, but then the pipe starts to get blocked. Keeve's inner monologue says that she hopes that Myarga the Hutt is recognising her, so kind of cooperates in a subtle way without giving up her cover. It's confirmed that the pipe got blocked by Terek using the Force on it, so the Nihil then resort to shocking Myarga. Zetar then kind of pushes Keeve out of the way and starts to interrogate Myarga themselves. And Myarga then confirms that Keeve Trennis and Terek are actually Jedi, right in front of the Nihil's eyes. And as this gets revealed, all of the Nihil start to attack Keeve and Terek, who then ignite their lightsabers in response. Keeve and Terek manage to hold their own against the Nihil, and then the Nihil electrocute the Hutt even further. This distracts the two of them, and then they start to get beat up by the Nihil a little bit. Now, a lot of this issue is, I'm like glazing over it, there's a lot of action scenes, there's a lot of cool artwork, but now obviously I'm just trying to stick mainly to the story points. So after these guys get beaten up, Lorna D then appears and shoots Myarga in the head. Lorna D is a Twi'lek. She is the central character of the audio drama Tempest Runner. She is also in Light of the Jedi and also in The Rising Storm quite a lot. She is one of the highest in the Nihil. She is a Tempest Runner, so you've got the Eye of the Storm, who is Mark Gilmore at the very top, and then he generally has 3 Tempest Runners, and it changes between them, but I think at this point it was Pan Aeta, Lorna D, and Zetar the Talpini, and Lorna D, thought to be dead, isn't dead, but obviously the Nihil don't tell the Jedi when someone isn't dead, so obviously the Jedi thinking that. That shows as a surprise, and then Keeve confronts Lorna D. Lorna D calls in Dr. Uttersound, who is a Shadra fan from The Rising Storm, and brings in a purple glowing box. Now, any of you reading the Rising Storm, who have finished The Rising Storm rather, you'll know what this is. The box then opens and something unseen starts affecting Keeve and Terek. They fall to their knees while holding their heads, and you can see it in the artwork, everything starts to go a bit strange for them. And then the final pages of this comic show, back on the Ataraxia, you've got Seret loses his connection with Terek, and for the first time we've ever seen with either of these characters, they refer to themselves as I instead of we. Seret then tries to reconnect with Terek, and then is immediately stunned and in pain. Their eyes go purple, and then they say, "No peace, no balance, only pain." And then their hand starts to turn to stone, as does the side of their face, and that is where this comic ends. So if you've read The Rising Storm, you should know what this being is that's kind of caused this, and it is the Leveler. And I'm not going to go into any more detail about the Leveler here, A, because there's very little to know about it, but also B, because you just need to read The Rising Storm. So this will all get continued in Volume 3 of The High Republic, and that's going to be issues 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15, and then it also will contain the Eye of the Storm issue 1 and 2. I haven't got issue 2 yet, but once I get that, I'll make a decision of whether or not I'm going to do all of it in one episode, like the trade paperback, or if I'm going to split them. But yeah, that, my friends, is where episode 88 ends. So let's give some more information on what's coming up and some background stuff before I head out. So a quick plug here, if you have been watching the Book of Boba Fett, which by recording this now has finished, if you want to hear people talk about each episode of the Book of Boba Fett week by week, as well as a big roundup of it, if you're listening to a podcast app, you're already on the feed of Comics in Motion, so you can just scroll past, like back a few episodes, and you'll see it. If you're listening on YouTube, you can go to the playlist, which is the TV show specials, which Mandalorian's in there, as well as the Boba Fett discussion. So yeah, just a big discussion on Book of Boba Fett with a wide variety of guests that change each episode, with myself hosting, so you can go check that out if desired. Also, that is a call to you guys. If you're listening on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're not listening on YouTube, please click the link in the description to go to my YouTube channel, where you can then subscribe there. Even if you don't listen on YouTube, I know barely anyone does, but if you could do that, it would mean a lot to me, because I've got playlists on there which have got all of the Star Wars Comics and Canon episodes. They're in different genres and things, so if there's one you just want to hear about all the High Republic stuff I've done, or all the Darth Vader stuff, or just things that are like bios about certain characters, all of those are in individual playlists, and there's a few crossover playlists as well. All episodes of genuine Chit-Chat, some of them have got video in them on YouTube as well, and they're also all in playlists by genre. And in addition to that, you've got some bonus stuff on there, like my Loki discussion, which was on the feed of Comics in Motion, and obviously the Book of Boba Fett and that sort of thing. Plus, if I can get the subscribers up to 100, then it means I can change the channel name from Gobbledygook to /genuine Chit-Chat, which I've been wanting to do for a while, but obviously I can't just translate my podcast followers onto the subscribers onto YouTube, or it'd be much easier to be able to do all that stuff. But if you are listening, that would mean a lot to me to go and do that. If you want to support the show in a different way, you can rate on Spotify out of 5 stars. You don't even need to write anything. You just click like 3 things and then you'll have given it a review. So please review both Genuine Chit-Chat and also Comics in Motion 5 stars. It would mean a lot to me and the rest of the guys. But you can also leave reviews on Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts. Leaving a review takes you a couple minutes. I know it's a bit of a pain, but it means the absolute world to both myself and all of my Comics in Motion family. It does help get the show up the charts and gets more exposure and things, so more people discover it, which is exactly what we want. So if you could do that as well. Otherwise, you can share on social media. You can tell your friends about it. Obviously, if any of your friends like Star Wars at all, please send them my show, because as I try and make it every episode, you don't actually even need to read any comics to enjoy the show. I know a handful of you guys do listen and read along, and the rest of you just listen. So please try and share and support and tell your friends about this as well. If you've already done all of those things, or if you don't wish to do any of those things, but you want to get some additional content and support the show in a different way, please check out patreon.com/genuinechitchat. If you go there for as little as £1 a month, which is like $1.50 a month, you can get access to my Patreon exclusive feed. So on there is occasional episodes of Star Wars Comics and Canon that get uploaded there early. I've also done plenty of book reviews on there that I have not released on this feed or on YouTube. You can't find them anywhere else. That is of Last Shot, which is about Han and Lando. There's also Dark Disciple, which is a Clone Wars novel about Quinlan Vos and Asajj Ventress. I've also done the Legends novel, Shatterpoint, which is a Clone Wars novel about Mace Windu. I'm currently listening to Darth Plagueis on Audible, and I'm going to be doing a review of that as well. I've got A New Dawn, which is the prequel book to Star Wars Rebels about Kanan Jarrus and Hera Syndulla. I think that's the next one I'm going to listen to. And I'm also going to listen to a huge amount of other Legends material and record book reviews for those that I will be releasing only on the Patreon feed. In addition to that, you also get a weekly show that myself and Megan do called Afterthoughts, where we watch movies or TV series or sometimes documentaries and put our thoughts on there. If it's a new movie, such as MCU stuff we see at the cinema, or a TV series, we give our spoiler-free thoughts. But if we do an older film or horror films or things like that haven't been out in the last 2 years, that are older than that, we will then generally talk about spoilers and stuff. We've done a huge amount of films. We've done people movies, horror films, thrillers, action, all kinds of stuff. And at the moment, we are doing a big Tom Hanks rewatch. So each week we're going to be releasing an episode where we've tackled record a Tom Hanks movie. We're doing it in chronological order, so we started with Big. We've also recorded one for The Burbs, which neither of us had seen. Megan hadn't seen Big either, which is baffling to me. We've also done one for Turner and Hooch. The next up is Joe versus the Volcano, then I think it's A League of Their Own, and then I think it's one or two others, and then Forrest Gump. So very, very excited to watch some of those movies, some of them again, some of them for the first time, and give our reviews on those. So if you want to hear more of an insight into mine and Megan's relationship, who's been a guest on multiple episodes of Genuine Chit-Chat and episodes featured in the Comics in Motion Network, and you want to support the show, please consider checking out the Patreon. As said, £1 a month, and you get hours and hours and hours of additional content. If you subscribe now, you get a link on Patreon where you can put in a podcast app, or you can just listen on a Patreon app or whatever, and then there's hours of additional content on there where you can just listen to loads of stuff, including us doing reviews of each individual Star Wars movie, as well as the Harry Potter movies we're going through at the moment as well. We've done a bunch of MCU stuff too, so a lot of nerdy things on there, but as I said, there's loads of non-nerdy stuff on there too. I've also done some reviews of non-Star Wars comics as well as the Star Wars book reviews, so there's loads of ways to support the show and to get loads of additional content, but Patreon is the best way to do that. So that to one side, guys, what have we got coming up? So next week, episode 89 of Star Wars Comics in Canon is going to be the second volume of Poe Dameron comics, which is written by Charles Soule. It's the only comic run that I haven't actually read before doing this, so I'm reading them week by week, basically as you guys are listening. So that's going to be the next week's one. Episode 90 is then going to be the High Republic Adventures Volume 2. Now that's going to include issues 6, 7 and 8 of the High Republic Adventures, but also it's going to include the High Republic Adventures Annual as well, which I received recently. It's got 5 short stories in there, but I have not yet read because I'm saving it for that podcast, so that's going to be quite exciting there. Then the week after that, episode 91 is either going to be the Trail of Shadows. Well, episode 91 is definitely going to be Trail of Shadows, which is a mini-series set in the second wave of the first phase of the High Republic, where someone tries to investigate the death of one of the characters in The Rising Storm. And I haven't finished that yet. I've read the first couple and I've just received issue number 5. So that's a 5-part mini-series there. So I'll probably be tackling that. But if I don't tackle that on that week, what I will be tackling is Out of the Shadows, which is the young adult book for the High Republic, Phase 1, Wave 2. If I do one of those, whichever one I do, I will then do the other one for the following week. So it'll be one of those little swap-aroos again. And then the episode after that, I will be doing Volume 3 of the High Republic comics. So that's the general idea of what you can expect for the next few weeks/month. I have now got Fallen Star. I am currently reading Fallen Star as well, but I have had to take a pause from that because I'm currently reading Sandman, which is the Neil Gaiman graphic novel. I'm reading the first volume of that, which is issues 1 to 8, because we are going to be doing that in the Comics in Motion book club. We're going to be recording that, I believe, next week, and then that should be out the following couple weeks or so, and that is going to be the 4th episode of the book club. The first one was Darth Vader, Volume 1, 2017. I did with Dave and Matt Lloyd. Then issue 2 was Mouse. Episode 3 was V for Vendetta. And then obviously number 4 is going to be Sandman. And we've already got a couple more lined up in the coming months as well. So plenty of reasons to subscribe to Comics in Motion and any of the stuff that I appear in. I do try and put on my YouTube channel as well. But that is generally what you can expect from Star Wars Comics in Canon going forward. I appreciate each and every one of you guys listening, especially all the way up to the end of this rambling nonsense. Please share on social media, rate on Spotify and all the other good places, subscribe, share with your friends, consider checking out my Patreon and supporting the show. And I just want to say I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. It means the world to me. I've got so many people listening to this show and to Genuine Chit-Chat. Got a lot of fun things planned for Genuine Chit-Chat over the year, but follow me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat. You get photos of the comics and some panels in which I talk about in this very show and things. And you also get snippets to episodes of Genuine Chit-Chat, so you can get a vague idea if you want to listen to those episodes before tuning in and downloading them. But yeah, find me on social media. That's the best place to keep up with me. Thank you as always, guys. And I will talk to you next Saturday with Poe Dameron Volume 2. And as always, may the Force be with you. The intro for Star Wars Comics in Canon is arranged by myself, Mike Burton, and the backing music was made by Eric Matias of soundimage.org.
You have just experienced host, creator, everything elser of Genuine Chit-Chat, and also the host and creator of Star Wars Comics in Canon, found on the Comics in Motion podcast, Mike Burton.